Hi, I'm Durucan. Welcome to People and Changing Organizations, the next chapter. This is where we talk with strategic HR leaders about transformation, innovation, and what it really takes to change an organization. Fresh insights, new ideas, real experiences. This is the future of work. Mehmet is a senior talent, leadership, and cultural leader with over 25 years global experience supporting organizations through transformation and change. He specializes in building high-performance cultures by aligning leadership behavior, talent systems, and organizational capability to real business outcomes. Let's begin. Today, we're here together with Mehmet Kocum from Aston Martin, and it's going to be an exciting, very contemporary, insightful conversation, which I'm sure. I'll just get right off the bat, Mehmet. You've built a career in senior talent and leadership and cultural roles across large, complex organizations. Could you tell us a little bit more about your journey and what originally drew you into the role of talent and organizational development?
Of course. And first of all, Durucan, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very glad to be here today. Well, in terms of my journey, I think, the starting point is I've been in HR for 25 years. It reveals my age, but it's been 25 years. First half of that 25 years, I would say I was holding mainly operational HR roles, and second half, I would say mainly talent management type of roles. So that's why my route into talent and organizational development wasn't particularly linear. And that's probably shaped how I think about work, how I think about HR today. As I said, I started my career in very operational HR roles, plant HR manager roles, regional roles, even store HR manager in retail. And that type of roles, I must say, they are much closer to the reality of work and obviously leaders on the ground. What really drew me into talent and organizational development was mainly seeing the pattern which repeat itself. So that pattern is mainly, strategy would be sound, structures would look right on paper, but when it comes to outcomes, it mainly depended almost entirely on leadership capability, almost entirely on culture and whether people felt trusted and enabled. So that's over time, when I look back, I became far more interested in how organizations actually perform through people, and especially, as you said, in complex and global environments. Talent, leadership, and culture sit at that intersection in my mind, and that's why I see them. I see them as not abstract concepts, but they are levers for execution. That's what kept me in this space, helping organizations move from, I would say, good intent to real behavioral change. So that's also what I say, the bright side of HR. So I really enjoy it.
Yes, perfect. And I think you're starting to touch on the nuances around the strategic role HR plays and,
Yes.
and how it can be leveraged as a strategic lever. Before we dive into that, let me take a step back and ask you around how many organizations are trying to find that right balance between hiring that external human capital, that external talent, and developing people from within. From your perspective, what does that kind of healthy balance look like, especially when it comes to architecturing a high performance culture?
Yeah. It's when I think about it, I believe a healthy balance is not a fixed ratio. The reason I'm saying, because I think it's all about intentionality. Because if you think about external versus internal, or sometimes people say buy versus what do we call it? Buy versus grow. So when you think about buy versus grow, external hiring is critical when you need, I would say, new capability, fresh thinking, or challenge the norms within the organization. And if external, but when you think about it, when external hiring becomes the default, it's usually signals something else. And that signal could be a lack of confidence in internal development,
right,
or weak succession, which we often see, or unclear career pathways. And great question about high performance, because high performance cultures are built when people believe effort and growth are recognized. Internal development always sends a powerful signal, and from the employee perspective, that signal indicates, as the company, we invest in you, and there is this deliberate action from the organization. And if I go back to your question, when I believe we should use external hiring to complement, not replace, and we should be really honest about which roles should be grown versus bought. I think when it comes to thinking that buying versus growing thing, it's really important the business narrative of the company. So where the organization is going, and an honest assessment of the capabilities, and then look into your strategic workforce and plan it internal versus external.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, so what you refer as like buy, grow, I remember this is at the heap of gig economy really taking off. So whilst I was in Accenture, and there was like mention of fluid workforce, which is more of a reference to kind of freelance that kind of comes in and out of organizations and kind of starts collecting almost like a portfolio of capabilities as they do that. And there was a huge emphasis around that 3B. So yeah, buy, build, or borrow, or buy, borrow, build. And you're right. It's the, and I think there's also an element around maybe the timing and the pressure of, okay, we need this new skill set, new capability. We don't have it internally, and it's going to take us time to develop that.
Yeah.
So we're going to go outside.
I think it requires very deliberate conversation.
Yes.
At top level, and then it's also like thinking about pros and cons, because you can see speed over. You can easily see, yes, it's a speedy solution, but is this the right solution? Or okay, maybe it's not so speedy, but actually maybe we may become a bit too reliant on current talent, and that current talent as well, as much as they're really good, they might not be the right capability mix for the organization and for the organization's real need.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And when it comes to attracting senior or niche talent today, what feels most different compared to a few years ago for you, and how has that candidate expectations or the meaning of a stronger employer brand shifted in your mind? What's your thoughts around this?
I think it's very much aligned with your previous question, because I believe what's most different today is when it comes to senior candidates. I believe they are asking much deeper questions. A few years ago, the conversation was often about the role scope, package, and the brand. But today, it's about credibility, values, leadership behaviors, even psychological safety. Candidates want to know what's really going on beneath the surface. And employee brand, the way that I see it, employee brand has shifted from being aspirational to being evidenced. So it's really important that actually there is a certain evidence showing what we are saying is actually what's happening, and people can easily actually triangulate what you say against employee reviews, leadership reputation, and how you behave during difficult moments. So it's really easy for candidates to actually get that information if you are not truly open and honest, and then that's why I believe authenticity matters far more than what I would call polish.
Yeah, polish, PR'd, packaged, marketed, outer-facing, or outward-facing base. Okay. Yeah.
The value proposition, or what we call like the brand promise versus employee experience, there is always gap in between, right?
Yes.
But it's really important to be really honest and open about that gap, and also very open and honest around the evidence that you are putting against to close that gap.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's really good. You're spot on. And let me double back a little bit around what you mentioned on psychological safety. So we're really big on this. We very quickly became almost like the ambassadors of this terminology. After Amy's resurfacing, because her work was actually from 20 odd years ago, but it only made, I guess, the front line or the mainstream business world through a New York Times article in 2014-15-ish. And she just kind of gained her popularity now, Amy Edmondson. And yeah, right off the bat, we've really championed that terminology, that concept, and everything that falls behind it. We got like workshops around it. So just quite curious around like what people ask or how they bring this up, how maybe without those words, but I guess in your mind you could easily categorize that's what they're talking about, that's what they're seeking clarity on. Can you delve into that a little bit?
Yeah, of course. And actually, it's not just, Amy Edmondson's book. Then obviously there is this, famous project Aristotle from Google, especially around high-performing teams, which I really actually like that, study. I think if I think about critical leadership capabilities today, the most critical capabilities in my mind are like not the technical capabilities, because in today's world, I think technical capabilities are much easier to learn or unlearn if necessary. But I think there are certain capabilities like the mindset shift towards psychological safety or providing psychological safety, but also like a sense making, emotional maturity, and probably the most important one is adaptive leadership, because leaders are operating in very in ambiguity almost constantly today. The ability to listen, to have the ability of listen, interpreting weak signals or responding without overreacting, they become much more vital in your day-to-day leadership behaviors. So the leadership capacity to hold tension between performance and well-being, pace and inclusion, or global consistency versus local reality, they are becoming much bigger leadership subjects for the organizations. And I believe where organizations often go wrong is treating culture as a program rather than a system. The focus on workshops or fancy statements, nice posters on the wall, and but they don't align the incentives of the organizations or decision rights or role modeling. Culture is built. It's very important. The culture is built in the everyday moments, and that moments are when what gets awarded, what gets tolerated, and what leaders do when things are truly hard.
Yeah. And you spoke. We're going to come to culture in a second, actually. But again, just picking up on one of the threads that you left there around learning, reskilling, unlearning. From your experience in leadership and learning at a global level, and yeah, you did touch on this around those capabilities most critical today around leaders, the ambiguity management, that emotional regulation. And is there anything else that you want to add around this?
So probably the last one I would add would be like a providing clarity.
Yeah.
Again, going back to the project Aristotle, it's not just obviously psychological safety. The project Aristotle talks about dependability, talks about clarity, and role alignment.
Yes.
Those are really important things, because one thing that I always say, for even in the organization that I work now, ownership is one of the values, and that obviously drives accountability, right? But the critical part is, how would you make people accountable if you don't tell them what you really expect from them?
Yes.
So that's why that clarity piece, providing clarity and aligning that clarity with obviously the business requirements, I think that's a critical leadership skill. And then from performance conversations perspective, nothing should be a surprise, because if the conversation is continuous with clarity, then everybody would know what they are expected of, and hopefully they deliver accordingly.
Yes. Yeah. Well, again, this takes me back to my golden years, let's call it, my earlier years in my professional career, where in PwC we were constantly hammered around managing expectations.
Yeah,
Managing expectations. This was like the theme that was, and these two words were really just hammered into our
yeah,
DNA, really. And obviously, to do that, you need that kind of clarity, instinct,
exactly,
and that clarity,
exactly,
mental approach or framework to everything you do, and the way you communicate with your stakeholders, right, internally or externally,
absolutely.
and it's a 360 thing. And just as a sidebar, I'm a qualified referee in UK, in England here, and I just had a CPD day yesterday. Again, every single time that we referees get together, there's always this same message around manage expectations, right? Yes, you're there applying law and there to be as fair as possible without getting influenced, but there's also an element of no surprises, right? So if
Yeah,
someone's gonna be cautioned or sanctioned in any way, ideally it shouldn't come as a surprise. You should set that up and
exactly.
once it happens, no one turns around and says, "Hey, where'd that come from?" To you, they should blame the person because they kind of set themselves up for that
Yeah,
disciplinary sanction. So yeah,
yeah.
perfect. Okay, okay. And moving on to now, circling back to the culture component, right? So I guess culture transformation always sounds like inspiring on paper. We've been involved in many culture change or culture transformation programs ourselves, but in reality, it can be slow and messy. So, in your experience, what has been the hardest part of that closing that gap between people's strategies of organizations that they talk about and the behaviors that leaders and teams actually show day to day?
Yeah. The hardest part is changing leadership habits under pressure. And you may recall this, saying, when the weather is nice, everybody is a good sailor.
Nice, yeah, yeah.
So when things are calm, most leaders behave in line with the stated values because it's easier, right? And under stress, they revert to instinct. And that's where gaps appear between what the organization says it values and how people actually experience it. Closing that gap requires consistency, courage, and reinforcement. Leaders need feedback, leaders need reflection, and sometimes challenge. And organizations need to design systems that make the right behaviors easier than the wrong ones. So, in simple terms, going back to our, previous questions, I think that piece is all about, again, leadership, and especially in the context of under pressure.
Yeah, yeah. And you've worked across global environments, right? So when it comes to that talent and culture practices, in your experience, what truly scales globally? And are there any nuances you'd call out about what should stay local?
Yeah, but the way that I approach it's again another saying I use all the time. So design globally, activate locally. So what scales globally, in my mind, are principles, frameworks, and to be honest, overall intent. Things like leadership expectations, talent philosophy, performance standards, those should be consistent, but how they show up must flex locally. Because culture at the end of the day is contextual. What feels empowering in one country may feel inappropriate or confusing in another country. So and then the way that I see it is sometimes the mistake organizations make is over engineering global solutions, and the best global models in my mind create clarity without suffocating local ownership. Going back to my first part, it's like so designing it globally, testing it globally, understanding that global consistency, but activation of it at a local level, I think it's crucially important.
Yeah. And have you got any war stories that you could share from your past career at any point? It can be.
Oh, well, several actually. Like
I'd love to hear some of those.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, one like a very easy. I think it was many years ago when I was an organizational effectiveness manager. I was running different listening activities in different parts of the world, and we were sitting in London. We designed everything. I said, okay, this is how it should be, and we launched it. And we made some serious mistakes when it comes to the way that we position the questions, like because we tested some of them. Like I remember one, for example, for like says a set of listening structure for Spain, and we said, okay, we can easily use the same structure for South America. So because we had we had operations in Argentina, like then the Spanish versus Argentinian Spanish. Oh my God, some of the stuff we heard back from the teams there, clearly it was like some sort of a cultural insult to them that that we use those things. And the other piece, like this is like a bad experience, but I think the good experience that I can highlight again many years ago, we developed a fantastic program called ICA Accelerate in one of my previous organizations, actually, in Ball. Activate, yes, ICA Activate. So that was a multi-language first line manager program that we developed as talent COE. But the way that we did was, yes, the overall framework, the overall intent, expected outcomes, they were all globally consistent. But when it comes to delivery of the program, we made we made the decision around, let's localize it as much as possible. And for example, some activities were completely different. The way that we actually launched it in Germany versus in the US, it was different. And one thing we did was, in order to create that ownership at company level, we wanted to use internal trainers as well as external trainers. So we mixed the facilitation structure really nicely. So then the participants actually could see people from Ball. So that would create more ownership around the program, because otherwise it will be, I don't know, an external trainer comes in, delivers the training, leaves the company, and that's it. But keeping an internal trainer, or be from HR or some sort of trainer people from, I don't know, maybe finance, actually that created a really good activation at local level, and it worked out really well.
It's almost like the difference change network does when you're going through like a change management program or a change slash transformation initiative, where you have those internal agents that belong to the entity. They're there for the long haul, they're committed, and they actually have the network to pull people around them, rather than just, like you say, someone just kind of comes in, does their bit slash their magic, if they can, and then they take off. So then they're different.
Yeah.
The so different gravitas between the two.
Exactly. This sense of ownership, it requires presence. Like when I say presence, I'm not referring to physical presence. I'm referring to presence from somebody from your organization, because then you relate it much quicker. So that's what we did. As I said, like a fantastic program designed globally. We kept the high levels, we kept the outcomes consistent across the board. But when it comes to delivering it, we activated it locally, and we made it really specific to that location, to that language. So it was a really good success story, actually.
Yeah, just landed much better. Yeah. Perfect. And one more like minor question around this. Let's say someone in HR senior enough to go indulge in a culture change program, and I'm not sure if I have enough buy-in internally from senior leadership or otherwise, but me as the HR person, I really kind of see it, and I see the picture from where I stand, and that needs to be done. What would be your tip to me for me to I don't know, enable me or open up or increase my options around getting A, sponsorship around this, and B, I don't know, any tips that I should really watch out for if I'm embarking on this kind of a journey?
Really good question, because we often use the word buy-in. Right? I try to I try to limit myself to use the word buy-in, because buy-in in my mind means that you have something to sell, and then in this case, automatically you create that relationship of a seller and a buyer, and it becomes a bit mundane, or it becomes more blunt. The way that I see it, it's all about, I think the approach versus style, right? So the way that I approach these type of things, first step is always proactive engagement. My recommendation would be to start as early as possible and be as proactive as possible. That proactive engagement is truly important, and actually very much like you create the need or you expose the need before they realize that the need is there. That proactive engagement automatically increases, credibility at your end. And then attentive listening is all about, okay, that's the engagement. When you listen to the stakeholders, especially the senior stakeholders, you truly put a label around the need, and then you can use that need in line with the business requirements, like the business narrative and why. So proactive engagement, attentive listening, and at this stage, I believe then, as HR people, our experience can come in. So leveraging our experience and actually trying to maybe propose some potential options, but not imposing those options. Then trying to come up with a co-creation, using some of the options that we leverage through our experience, but then co-create it to make it ours as a whole rather than ours as HR only. So that co-creation piece, and obviously delivering the next step, monitoring the results, course correcting if necessary, and truly believing it. Whatever we come up with today, it may need change in maybe 1 month, 3 months, 1 year time. So we shouldn't be holding them as if they are our children, because everything changes. They should evolve as well, looking into it, monitoring it, and getting data insight with it. So we can actually look into in a more like a evolution type of approach.
And yeah, I love that like co-creation concept, because it really embraces everybody's kind of emotionally committed as well when there is kind of part of their thoughts are being invited in. And around that kind of co-creation, you were mentioning, you should be bringing forward as the kind of HR person angle or the expert, bring in a few options. What could be some of those options? And I'm asking this for HR people that could benefit from this, so that's why.
So if you are asking from culture perspective, again, from culture perspective, culture is what happens when no one is watching, right? It's truly important in that sense. So it's like, okay, what is our consistent message as the organization? I think from HR perspective, we are the guardians of that message, and that message should be consistently heard, consistently delivered throughout the organization. So once we have that consistent message, then we should be looking into, okay, so how do we make that actually everyday reality in our organization, and then aligning it with, again, business narrative is important. From culture change perspective, I don't think there is one way of doing it. It's really important, the business reality is really important where we are. One example from my past life, I was supposed to implement a brand new performance review process in one of my previous companies, global organization, God knows how many countries, God knows how many languages. Like, it's very, very complex, and it's not just the organization, but the business is also complex. We used to have aerospace manufacturing. It's like in sectors, industries perspective. It was also really complex.
Sure.
The performance review process perspective, again, it's a massive change from culture perspective. At the time, the big thing about performance management was, should we go ratingless, right? Because everybody was talking about ratingless performance review processes. It was the buzzword for when it comes to performance conversations. Some major organizations were selecting ratingless processes. And at the time, because I was the global process owner for performance management, I was asked the question, okay, should we go for ratingless, Mehmet?
Yeah.
And then I said, Well, actually, I don't think I should have an answer now, because this is not about what I want. It's about what culture requires and what culture actually tolerate from implementation perspective. And at the time, what we did was we ran a survey. We ran different listening sessions at top level, not down in the organization, and we listened to our people and we said, okay, this is what we have now. How would you describe the ideal? How would you think about a really good performance conversation? We talked about our CEO, we talked about our C-suite. Okay, so how would you describe a good performance review conversation? And none of the conversations actually talked about rating lists. The idea was around goal clarity. The idea was around consistent feedback, and even like people ask for a rating at the end because they wanted to know how actually they perform, and then in their mind they wanted to have something there saying, okay, I've performed well or I didn't perform that well. Going back to the conversation around nothing being a surprise, that conversation helped a lot. And going back to my approach, leveraging our experience, we said, okay, the organization is asking for a process with ratings, not rating lists. Okay, what can we do then differently when it comes to ratings? Because again, at the time, the company had 5-point rating scale. Most of the companies which use ratings, they would use 5-point rating scale. But then leveraging our experience, right? I looked into different researches around rating systems, how how human psyche works. And actually we came up with the idea of 4-point rating scale rather than 5-point rating scale. So yes, we offered a process with ratings, but we changed it and we said, okay, if you think about if the journey goes into rating this, then rating this process requires very strong performance review culture, very strong feedback culture. And we believe that we don't have it in our organization as of today. Okay, how can we use the new option to actually grow into that reality in the future? So that's why we came up with the 4-point rating scale. And when you think about 4-point rating scale, there is no midpoint. So the conversation has to be positively inclined, what we call, future oriented, because then the performance is positive. Or the conversation should be a bit of negatively inclined, means that actually the individual didn't perform as anticipated. Then the conversation should be, okay, let's look back what went well, try to understand the reasons, and then look into future and try to come up with solutions that actually that negative performance would not happen again in the future. So 4-point rating scale was completely different than what we had, but definitely different than what the buzzword of HR was telling at the time. Does this answer your question?
This was probably, I'm guessing, around 10 years ago, give or take.
2018, 8 years ago.
Yeah. Okay, because I remember that era quite clearly. That phase quite clearly, and you're right. That's what we've done. Like we've seen in personality inventories as well. When you ask someone if you're this kind of person, never, always, sometimes. And then if you have a middle option, then everybody kind of plays safe and they kind of go for that middle selection. So when you do 4, then to your point, they just have to lean into one way or another and not play it safe, so to speak.
Yeah, and also leadership accountability perspective, it's also very powerful, because midpoint can be easily used as a runaway point, because as a leader, you might say, well, I wanted to give you this, but HR forced me to give you this because of the curve or whatever. But when you don't have a midpoint, the conversation becomes harder for the line manager, but also the conversation becomes more meaningful for the individual and for the line manager.
Okay, perfect. And from this now, let's move on to this. I guess we haven't touched upon the dreaded 2 letters AI just yet up until this point in our conversation.
Yes.
So I think now is the time. So let's do that. So one of the big promises of AI in HR is the ability to
Uh-huh.
spot hidden potential things that humans might overlook, while also making processes potentially fairer. I say potentially with a funny look. We will, we
Yeah,
could
yeah.
dive into that. But do you believe technology can genuinely help us assess talent more objectively?
Well, going back to your comment, AI has been like I don't know, I think it has been the subject of pretty much every webinar about HR at the moment, right? Like either it be, I don't know, talent acquisition and AI or performance reviews and AI, leadership development and AI. It's there. I believe technology can absolutely help. There is an if there. It's not but, it's a if we are honest about its limitations. AI can reduce inconsistencies, as you said. Definitely, it can help surface patterns. Uh, so it can, it can reduce surface patterns that human beings may miss, or it may challenge bias in decision making. But I don't think it would, or it doesn't. I don't think it removes bias. It reflects the data and assumptions we feed into it, right? We train it at the end of the day as human beings. So for me, the real opportunity is combining technology with human judgment. I think it's not an or situation, it's an and situation. AI should inform decisions, but AI should not replace accountability. The core accountability should remain with people, and I think if we use it well, it can help us. I don't know, ask better questions about potential rather than pretending there is a single objective answer. It's the way that I see it, it's like with AI rather than for AI. It's like a combining it together and being really open and honest about its limitations. One example that I gave when it comes to these type of conversations, AI is I don't know, taking up jobs or whatever. But I think I'm not sure about the exact dates, but when Excel was first introduced, the premise was, oh yeah, we once Excel is up and running, there won't be any accounting departments anymore. So hence there won't be any accountants anymore in the companies because Excel is going to take over. Well, that we do have accountants, we do have accounting departments at the moment, but what the accountants do today versus what they did then, they're, they're completely different. So the way that I see it, yes, AI will replace some certain tasks, that's for sure. In my mind, this will evolve into something else from human beings' perspective. We will have something in it, but in terms of what we do today versus what we will be doing in the future, I think that's going to be the difference. That's going to be like how we actually develop ourselves, how we actually evolve ourselves into a different reality of technology.
Yeah, I like that. And you're right with the webinars, like everything is AI and whatever, AI and what, like it's as if you don't have those two letters there, no one's going to show up. And I think there's a bit of an inflation around it, I guess you could argue. So we've developed a AI recruitment tool ourselves. Been working on it for so long, 2 years, it's still going. And you're right. In the background, it's fine tuning the models, and there's a lot of work goes like technically. But I also see on the other side of the equation for HRs to understand what it can do, it cannot do. To your point, initially, when we're having conversations in the marketplace around these with HR, they're like, "Oh, so me as a person that does the interviews, I'm going to lose my job." No. You're going to get to do a whole lot more interesting stuff, and you're going to get rid of the admin because the scheduling and all of these operational things is basically taken off your plate. If anything, you're given a whole lot of time back. But AI is not going to tell you who to recruit and send out a contract for them to sign off. And you're still part of the decision making process and pivotal. You still play your pivotal role. It just makes your life easier. It's been like a very educational conversation by conversation piece that we've had to go through and are still going through. So you're right. I think my observation is people are clocking on. People are getting the fact that, okay, AI is not going to be or component, but it's going to be an and component. It's going to complement what I do. It's not going to completely eradicate myself or my role completely from head to toe. Okay.
I'm really optimistic about it. As you know, that like I think there is this pessimistic camp and optimistic camp. When it comes to AI overall, I'm on the optimistic camp. I believe if we actually use it well, it can open new opportunities for all human beings. It's not just like it's not just work. It's beyond that. But again, I think it's going to be a fundamental question and fundamental answer to that. Okay, well, how are we going to use it and for what?
Yeah, the how and the what. I think spot on. Hit the nail in the head. Time will tell. We will see how it all goes and how the cards will all fall together. Perfect. Okay. Right. So as we come to a close towards the end of our conversation, let me ask you a few quick fire questions.
Yeah. Fire away.
Yeah, we'll have 3 of them, just so you know what to expect and how many to expect. So, looking back over the past year, 2025, which idea, book, or experience has most shaped how you think about people or learning and work today?
Yeah, well, I'm a bookworm. I read a lot. I enjoy reading. Some of the things that actually I really enjoyed learning about was, for example, we talked about clarity piece, right? So there was this saying in one of the books that I read was like a clarity beats intensity. So it's like organizations don't fail because people are working hard. They fail because priorities are unclear and energy is misdirected. That was something that I really, really enjoyed, to reflect on. And there was another thing, like it was from a book called The Collective Edge. It's a really nice book, The Collective Edge, I think by Colin Fisher, if I'm not mistaken. So The Collective Edge, the starting premise of the book talks about, so the book is all about high performing teams, group dynamics and making groups more effective when it comes to performance. So the book starting premise talks about Harry Potter's villain. So the question was, okay, who is the villain in the Harry Potter books/movies? Well, when I was reading it, obviously I said, okay, it's Voldemort, because Voldemort is the villain in Harry Potter books. And the book Collective Edge was saying, well, actually, it's not the Voldemort. Voldemort is a villain, yes, but when it comes to the big villain in the book, I think it's the Sorting Hat. And all of a sudden, wow, yes, the Sorting Hat, is all about putting people into certain boxes and saying, okay, this is how your character, or this is how you behave, or how you're expected to behave. It was really good because in a certain role, certain characteristics may change or may differ in time, but when it comes to group work, there is no individual characteristic really matter, but the collective characteristic of the team. It was really good in that sense. I really enjoyed reading that book. And then the other book I read this year was, which I really enjoyed it. It's Never Split the Difference. It's by Chris Voss. It's all about negotiation and how you actually use language to come to a common ground. And one takeaway from that book for me was the answer. If the answer is no, is actually not a good it's not a bad place. No is a good place to start, because that means that actually the person is open to different ideas, because getting a no from somebody is better to get a yes, but a fake yes that the person doesn't deliver. So getting a no is much stronger than a fake yes. So if you have a no, actually that means there is still an option, there is still a possibility that actually you can work out into into an outcome. It was in that sense, I really enjoyed that book as well. So,
interesting. Yeah. It's that gives you something to work with or work from.
Exactly.
Versus if someone is absolutely giving you a fake facade of a yes. And I like that analogy around essentially around pigeonholing as well. So that's really good. All right, thank you, thanks. And next up, if you could place a single sentence on a billboard near your office or a university campus, what would you have? What would that have people read every day as they walk by or drive by?
Yeah, there is a favorite saying, and I think I've already said that. So it's the culture is what happens when no one is watching. I really like this, billboard I really like this expression as a billboard message.
Yeah.
It's exceptionally well worded. Like a culture, it is what happens when no one is watching. And then again, in your organization, we talked about stress, the implications of if the weather is nice, everybody's a good sailor. But actually, what it really matters is when we are under stress, which is quite common, when we don't feel ourselves at our best. That's the point that actually do we really scale back to our instincts, and sometimes those instincts are not so well intended.
Yes.
So that's crucially important. So wherever I go, I try to it's really important how we operate today, but also it's really important how we operate when the things are not so well. So there shouldn't be a difference in between.
Yeah, perfect. No, that's really good. And with that, if listeners today were to take away just one insight from this conversation, what do you hope stays with them?
Good question. I think I'm going to go back one of the things that you've already said. Talent, leadership, and culture are not HR topics. They are business performance topics. When organizations treat them that way, outcomes change. When HR help them become business processes, actually outcomes change. When HR work with departments, work with top leaders, senior leaders to make those elements as business elements, actually outcomes change.
Yes, perfect. HR is a strategic lever. Perfect. Thanks, Mehmet, for the conversation. It's been a delightful and insightful conversation as suspected. So very, very glad to have you on board and share your perspectives and experiences with us. And thanks so much.
Well, thank you, Durucan, for inviting me. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much for your questions.
Been a pleasure. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to follow the podcast and share it with someone who might find it valuable. Until next time, stay curious and keep shaping the future of work.